In this Elden Ring Nightreign video, I'm going to be talking about the best incantations. I'm going to be ranking them from S, A, and B tier. Anything below B tier isn't included in this video, and it's just, frankly, something you should probably try and avoid using in this game. There may be situations for those spells where they're good, but these spells, for the most part, are effective in just about any run. So let's take a look at the B tier spells first. These are spells that are great in certain situations, but they have some limitations that make them not as effective as some of the other spells on this list. And for the B tier ones, I haven't done them in a particular order. It's not like the beginning of this list is better or worse than the bottom. I simply grouped them all into this tier. So first you have Protection of the Erdtree. This boosts your non-physical damage negation for you and nearby allies. I don't know the exact amount. In the base game, it was 30%. It's likely that it's a little bit less in this game. But even if you got like 20% or 15%, that's still a good amount of damage negation to give each other, considering you can buff your whole party with it. So if you go into like an event boss, like the one that's out now that deals tons of lightning damage, or you go into the next boss that deals different types of damage, you can mitigate some of that, giving your team a better chance of survival. This would be higher on the list, but I prioritize offensive spells mostly, since offense usually was what wins fights. And you're not going to use Protection of the Erdtree like out on the landscape where you might use an offensive spell most of the time, simply because you're trying to get things dead quicker. And next we have Blessing of the Erdtree, which puts a heal over time on yourself and nearby allies. And I think this lasts around 75 seconds or something like that. It's a very good duration of a buff. And again, it's one of those that if you buffed at the beginning of a Night Lord battle, that you give your team a chance to survive better. And even though the healing from this is not super strong, it's going to maybe save yourself like one healing potion over the duration of the fight, which could be just enough to push you over the edge. Next is Aspect of the Crucible Breath. This does fire damage in a conal area in front of you, and if you hold down the button, it'll do it even longer, spitting out even more fire. And this is just really good for bowling like fire weak bosses like Crucible Knights or Erdtree avatars, or, you know, any like group of enemies. You can just bulldoze through them. It's not so good on Night Lords because they don't tend to stay in place, and it's dangerous to hold that button down. Otherwise it'd be higher on our list. Next is Triple Rings of Light. This does holy damage in kind of like a conal AoE in front of you. It throws out 3 rings that then come back and hit a second time. And this would be higher on our list, but it's very high in FP cost, and it can't be charged. You have to spam it, so it doesn't take advantage of passive effects that boost charged incantations like some incantations do. And it's very difficult to stand there and spam a spell over and over in a Night Lord fight. It's not so hard to do in other boss fights. So you can't really use it as effectively as you'd want, because you can't typically just stand there and spam spells while those bosses move out of range and come at you sometimes. Next is Discus of Light, and this is on this part of the list for similar reasons. It's very cost-effective FP-wise, so it's very, very cheap. But it's very difficult to use in a Night Lord boss because you can't sit there and just spam most of the time with the Night Lord moving out of range, and again, you can't charge it either. So it's a great source of holy damage for cheap, and it can stack up if you can spam it, but it's difficult to do in certain boss fights. Next is Swarm of Flies, which you can cast while moving, which is nice, and you can kind of spam it. It does physical damage, and also it hits repeatedly and does blood buildup on the target, so you can trigger hemorrhage with it. And it's one of those spells that's just really good for spamming into a boss when like other people are attacking it repeatedly. Getting those blood loss triggers, and especially if they have like any sort of bleed weapon that's contributing, you can get lots of bleed triggers very, very quickly. It's not the strongest in terms of damage, and once you trigger a couple of blood losses, it gets very difficult to trigger like a 3rd and 4th one. So it's best used maybe at like the beginning of a fight, but not so far into the middle of a fight. Next is the Flame of Frenzy. This sort of shoots fire damage out in a conal AoE in front of you. It actually has decent range, and you can hold it down and charge it for increased damage, and also take advantage of increased charged incantation casts if you have those passive effects, or like Godfrey Icon or something like that. And it does surprisingly good damage, particularly if you can get like under a big target, under a big boss, and use it there where it can hit multiple times. It can be very, very deadly. The only downside is it does build up madness on you while you're casting it, so if you spam it too quickly or use it too often, you will trigger madness, which deals damage to you and rips off a huge chunk of your FP. Next is Dragon Claw, which is honestly one of 2 dragon spells that I can recommend to people in this game. Their dragon spells typically have way too high of FP cost for the damage that they do, and you would have to like take lots of relics that scale with like breath and roar attacks and also Dragon Communion incantations in order to get the most out of them. But that's really hard to do. So this skill, or the spell, what it does is it leaps you up into the air and slams down with a dragon hand, and you can do it twice in a row back to back. And the reason this isn't higher on the list is because it can be interrupted rather easily. Like if you get hit in the start of the animation, it won't go off, whereas Dragon Maw can anyway, and this does good physical damage and good stance damage. So if you're going through stance breaks, this can be a good way to do it. Next is Beast Claw. This does like a conal AoE of physical damage in front of you. It doesn't have super long range and super high AoE, but if you charge it, the range gets longer and the AoE gets better. And it does modest damage in my opinion. It's very reliable at hitting targets in front of you, especially if you use the charged version. You can almost guarantee yourself to hit anything unless it's super mobile like a Knight's Cavalry or something like that. So it's just a good way to get some physical damage reliably most of the time. Stone of Garank is a good spell that has very good range. This is another one that does physical damage, has fairly good stance damage as well, so it can help you get stance breaks on bosses. And you can chain this one back to back in order to cast it faster. You can't charge it, but the spamming of it can be very nice, especially since you can do it from so far away. It's just difficult to always land all your attacks on very mobile bosses. Next is Lightning Strike, and this does sort of like a lightning pattern of lightning bolts in front of you in like a rectangle out in front of you, and it can hit multiple targets, which is really nice. It doesn't have too long of a cast time, but it has a little bit of one, and what's great about this spell is that you can spam it back to back to back to back to do it multiple times and AoE down enemies. It doesn't have the biggest AoE radius, so it's not like you're going to hit like into a wide group of enemies, but it can make it reliably hit bosses, and bigger bosses can hit multiple times from the lightning bolts, which is nice. Next is Catch Flame, which is one I don't think too many people use, but it actually has pretty decent damage for how fast you can cast it, and you can spam it back to back to back. So if you can get like behind a Crucible Knight or under a boss and just spam it like your melee weapon, you can use it that way. It's very difficult to use if you've never used it before though, which is why it's not higher on the list, and the range is exceptionally short. Next is Honed Bolt. This spell works a lot like the Thunderbolt skill in the sense that it channels a lightning bolt from the sky that comes vertically down onto the target. You can't charge it, but you can spam it back to back, so if you can get that first cast off, successive casts are faster. So ideally you would spam this when using it. Again, this is difficult to do in some boss fights where the boss is constantly moving out of range, or maybe it's aggroed onto you. Otherwise it would be higher on the list. Ancient Dragon's Lightning Strike is a fantastic spell when you can get under big targets. You can charge it for increased damage in range, but it has a very long cast time when you're charging it, making it likely that you're going to be interrupted. And the bolts don't hit reliably in my experience. Sometimes they miss the targets that you're trying to hit because they get in between, the areas where the bolts are. Otherwise, this would be higher on our list, but in some circumstances, this spell can be absolutely devastating. And then lastly in our B tier is Black Flame Ritual. This spell is good at putting a fire AoE around you that also deals the Black Flame effect, which deals damage based on the enemy's max health. The higher max health they have, the more damage this is going to deal. So this is excellent against Night Lords. And if you can get it into like a bigger enemy, get under a bigger enemy or boss and cast it under them, they can stand in it more effectively. It's just sometimes hard to get smaller targets the range exactly perfect. And you can charge it for a larger range though, so I definitely recommend charging it, especially if you have the passives that boost incantation damage when they're charged. Next is Flame Fall Upon Them, and this is a really good fire spell that kind of has a shotgun effect where it shoots out 12 fireballs in front of you and has a pretty good range as well. What's great about this spell is it almost guarantees that you're going to hit whatever targets in front of you, no matter how mobile they are, because even if they're moving around, one of the fireballs is going to clip them. And if you throw it into a big target and hit with multiple fireballs, you can deal a lot of damage, making it really effective against larger targets. Next, we'll take a look at Poison Armament. This puts the poison effect on your weapon for some time, allowing you to do poison buildup. I really like this on Iron Eye. I think he's about the only character that I would use this on right now, unless you're maybe using it on Revenant. Usually, Executor and Duchess usually have status effects or with poison already on them. But Poison Armament can be absolutely deadly on Iron Eye, allowing him to build up poison with his bow. Maybe he has a frost effect on his bow, so he's doing frostbite and poison with this. That can be really, really strong because it does buff bows. The reason it's not higher on the list is because poison does damage over time instead of more immediate damage like bleed or frostbite or something like that. And also because it doesn't add any damage to his bow. Next is Black Blade. This is a holy damage spell that has insane range. It can clip through multiple targets, and it deals pretty decent damage. It also reduces the max HP of the target by a bit when it hits, and it's just really good against holy weak bosses or attacking from range into multiple enemies where you're safe. It has a really, really long distance. It has kind of a long windup, but you can do a follow-up after the first one for extra damage, and it's not very FP. Like, it costs a good amount of FP, so it's not one you can spam reliably unless you have a huge FP pool, but as you get further into a run, it can be really, really deadly. And honestly, it's one of the best holy damage spells to hit bosses reliably that are pretty mobile. Next is Dragon Maw, and this is the other dragon spell that I would recommend to people. It does physical damage, very high stance damage, and what's great about it is the hyper armor. When you're casting it, you can pretty much tank through anything. You have to be careful when you're a caster because you don't usually have the highest health pool, that you don't take a massive hit in the middle of it and just die. But you can basically poise through a lot of attacks and just keep using it over and over. And in the base game, you can just stance break bosses with it very, very easily. So if you want good physical damage and you want to help with stance breaking, this is a great spell. Next, we'll take a look at Giant's Flame Take Thee. This is a fire damage spell that can be used with range. It has a large explosion radius, and you can charge it for extra damage as well. And what I really like about it is not only the damage it does, but the explosion radius. It makes it more likely you're going to hit the target if they move out of the way at the last minute, because when it explodes, it can still clip them, unlike some other projectile spells. Next is Whirl o' Flame, and this spell is one that I think slept on by a lot of people. It deals significant fire damage from range. It tracks onto the target, and you can charge it for increased range as well and damage. And it's like one of those that will actually go a lot further than you think it will. So you can use this from a safe distance and usually land it on your target, even if they're moving around a bit. Lansseax's Glaive is a lightning damage spell that has a little bit of a long cast time that you can get staggered out of if you're not careful, but it has a good frontal AoE damage. It is not the most cheap FP spell ever, which is probably why it's not higher on the list, that and the fact you can get interrupted rather easily. But it is reliable in terms of hitting targets for lightning damage and also hitting multiple enemies in front of you. So if you have a big FP pool, you can use this one over and over to just clear out enemies. Burn o' Flame puts your hands down on the ground and shoots fire columns up into the air, dealing damage to targets around you and multiple damage if it's like a large target that the multiple columns of fire can hit, making it really good against big enemies like the Ice Dragon and things like that. And you can charge this for more columns, like a larger radius of columns, so you have even more columns can hit that target. It doesn't increase the damage, but if those columns hit that target multiple times, then you will increase your damage from that. And lastly is Black Flame. This spell does fire damage at range. You can charge it for extra damage, and the Black Flame effect does damage over time based on the max HP of the target. So this is very, very deadly against like Night Lords and bosses, end-of-day bosses, things like that have huge health pools, because the larger the health pool is, the more this spell is going to do. And then moving on to our S-tier spells, there are not a lot of them admittedly, but there are some absolute monsters that you should get anytime you see, depending on what character you are. So first up is Elden Stars. This is a holy damage spell that has a really long cast time, but can be cast from super far away, hits repeatedly on the target for a good amount of time, and will eventually crash into the target for explosive damage. You can't have two of these out at once, otherwise it would be even stronger. But basically what this allows you to do is throw this up and then cast other spells while it's floating around in the air dealing damage, or run in and melee while it's out in the air doing damage. So it can free you up to get, use your FP on a spell and then melee attack, or continue casting while it's out in the air. And it's really good against some of the most difficult bosses like the Deathrite birds and things like that, or even the moose guy, the magical moose that flies around, Ancient Spirit, etc. Next is Flame of the Fell God, and this is good for similar reasons. This does fire damage, it doesn't have as long of a range, so you have to be closer, which can put you more in danger. But it will track onto the target before exploding into a fire explosion that deals solid damage. It puts fire all over the ground that deals damage over time if the target is standing in it. And what this again does is it frees you up to cast other spells while it's floating towards the target, or run in and melee while it's going off. And it can be cast at range, keeping you safe while it tracks onto the target. Next is Bloodflame Blade. This is absolutely phenomenal if you use it on like an Executor, or a Duchess, or an Iron Eye. It's going to add fire damage to your weapon for a very good duration. I think it's like 60 seconds or something like that. But it also adds blood buildup to your weapon that continues for a little bit after you hit. And this can be really, really deadly on, an Executor or Duchess that's not using like Chilling Mist or Poison Mist, which is few probably. But it can also be really strong on Iron Eye, not only increasing the damage of each shot that he deals, but also helping them apply hemorrhage to the target, getting blood buildup on them, ripping off chunks of health when that triggers. And because it lasts such a good amount of time, he can just rebuff as necessary. And a lot of Iron Eyes aren't using their FP for anything anyway, so this is really good when you can get this on him. And likewise, Electrify Armament is good for similar reasons. It doesn't have the bleed buildup on the target, but it does apply lightning damage to your weapon, which increases your damage again, which is really strong on Iron Eye, just increasing his general output of damage. And it's very good against lightning weak bosses. The upcoming Dark Drift Knight event is starting in a couple of days, or a day or so like that. He's weak to lightning. This would be absolutely deadly on an Iron Eye or a Duchess or an Executor if they're not using Chilling or Poison Mist. So if you're playing Iron Eye, for sure you want this. If you're playing either of those two characters, you might want it as well. Next is Frenzied Burst. I absolutely love this spell. It's one of my favorite to get when playing in this game, and what it does is it shoots fire damage from an extremely long range. Like, this thing can hit from so far away. It's incredible. And it has a very fast speed, which means it rarely misses. It can go through target shields if they're blocking, like if they're a human character like a knight or something like that. And you can charge it for increased damage. So what this allows you to do is play from very, very far away on the target, stay safe, like if you're playing against Adele, or maybe if you're going to be fighting against the Dark Drift Knight, you can stay very far away so that you're not in danger of his AoEs around him and still hit because the target tracks so well and is so fast. Next is Golden Vow. This increases your damage and your damage resistance for yourself and nearby allies for I think it's like 90 seconds, somewhere in that range, 75 seconds, 90 seconds, something like that. This is really strong because it makes you less likely to die in fights, and some of these bosses, especially the event bosses, really tough, and boosts the damage of your whole team. So if you see a Golden Vow, you absolutely want to get it. If you're on comms with your team, if you're playing with friends, make sure you tell them you have it, buff them at the beginning of boss fights, etc., so that they have that extra damage going into fights. Next is Black Flame Blade, and this buffs for a very short duration. I think it's like 6 to 8 seconds, somewhere in that range. But it adds a significant amount of fire damage. If you use this on like an Iron Eye or something like that, it will almost double his damage. Like, that's how effective it is. Because keep in mind, the Black Flame effect that hits the target is based on their max health. So if you're firing into a Night Lord, it's going to be even more effective. The downside is that you have to buff with it much more often than you do Blood Flame Blade or like Electrify Armament. But it's more effective in general. The damage that you get from it is so good. So if you see a Black Flame Blade and you're playing like, I don't know, Recluse, or you're playing Revenant and you see it and you've got an Iron Eye in your party, make sure you drop this for him because it's absolutely deadly. And if you see these buffs like Blood Flame Blade, Black Flame Blade, Electrify Armament, Poison Armament, and you're playing one of these, spellcasting classes, but you have an Iron Eye or a Duchess or an Executor in your group, you should really consider dropping this for them because they'll probably use it more than you. And last on our list is Lightning Spear, and the reason that this one-off spell is an S tier compared to something like Black Flame or Flame Sling, or another projectile spell that you just lob, is because it's faster. You almost never miss with Lightning Spear unless you're just too far away, and you can charge it for way more damage. Most charged spells deal 20% more damage on average, but Lightning Spear deals I think it's 40% more damage when it's charged. It's really, really strong for charging. You can take advantage of those passive effects that increase charged incantation damage, Godfrey Icon, and it can just be really, really deadly, and it's not that expensive FP-wise either. So it's just a really strong spell in general, and it's one that you can get really regularly, so don't pass it up if you see it. So that wraps up our list of incantations ranked. I'll probably do a similar list for sorceries as well if you guys like this video. What did you make of my list? Did I get the rankings about right? Did I miss any spells that should have been on here? Do you have any questions about some of these spells? Let me know in the comments below.